The constant refinement and improvement of anything, better, 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 where the best ideas win and the worst ones fall off and die, is how we got here. You and I as a species, all the animals around us, and it's the process that's beautiful yet harsh and discriminating, but it can often produce amazing things. Now, this evolutionary process, if we use it correctly, and I have, we can produce a process that helps us solve PMP questions better as well. So I'm going to teach you how I use the evolutionary process to get to a perfect, what we believe, a perfect question solving strategy. So let me walk you through it. All right, before I do that, I want to tell you a story. Now, I was watching some video on YouTube, as all good stories start out with, and I saw this guy they were talking about AI, artificial intelligence. And before that, they were talking about the movement of animals. And they said like, oh, there's this interesting story about how we were studying the movement of animals, trying to replicate them. And whether it was in the brain or it was some kind of motion, how the motion of animals, the movement of animals was created so that we could try to create it in our AI. So when those things take over, they move nicely. And they looked at fish, weirdly. They looked at trout in a stream. I don't know if you know anything about streams, but they flow. And the water's kind of rough, going back and forth, and there's rocks in it. And they watched the trout. And they saw that the trout in there moved in different ways, depending on where they were. Now, when they were in the turbulent flow and moving kind of positions around the stream, they were very erratic in their movements, and it wasn't as, smooth and cost efficient as far as like energy goes when they were moving between it, because they were fighting with that stream of water that's coming in, that turbulent flow. They're just doing everything that they possibly can to just navigate it and move it. All right. And then they saw that like a lot of times the trout would move behind these little rocks, these boulders. What the boulders did would kind of block the stream, and they would create, sort of a laminar flow, if you will. It's just a smoother flow behind it. And what happened was the trout would go in there and they would change the way they moved from the erratic whatever to nice and smooth way, where they were kind of dancing or surfing behind the different currents that are back there that were created because of how things flowed around there. And they thought, oh, that's interesting. And they were like, well, is the trout kind of like dancing on its own, or is that just the motion that's dictated inside of them that they know is the best way to go through? So they were studying it over and over, and they realized what they did was they set up this experiment. Okay, and so they had a regular trout do it, and they watched the movement, and they said, let's do something crazy. So they saw the movement of the regular trout, and then they found a dead trout. Let's just say they found a dead trout. They killed a trout. And they hooked it with a little line behind the rock. And what they saw was when the trout was on a line in the regular flow, it was all over the place, nothing organized. It wasn't even flowing like a regular trout. But when it was behind the rock, for a couple seconds, it modulated, but this trout's not alive, but it started to move like in the motion that the exact same live trout was moving. So you might be like, Scott, I don't know what you're talking about. But here, just picture this. The live trout was moving in a certain way behind this rock that was super efficient, took advantage of every opportunity there. And then when the trout was dead and pulled behind that rock, had the same movement. It was just operating because its body had been refined over years and years and years to operate like in the right way and to be contoured, if you will. I'm using some license that I'm not, competent to make, but it had been contoured through evolution to be able to be smooth there, so that when operating in that condition, it was flowing well. All right. So the weird thing is, alive and a dead trout move the same way. So how does this apply to that? You're trying to solve PMP questions. Let me bring it back. All right. So PMP questions are turbulent, right? You get thrown 200 of them. Think about that. 200 crazy questions, situations, and the water's just rushing at you, right? So what we want to do is we don't want to take on that question just like that trout, like running right in straight to the water. Because what happened with the trout there? They had to compromise their cost efficiency of their movements or their efficiency of their movements. They're just trying to survive through that current. They're okay. They're not going to drown. They're in the water. But it wasn't as good as when they were behind the rock. So they needed something to block them. So you don't want to go into questions the same way. like that trout into the turbulent stream. You want to have some kind of rock that blocks things for you and makes it easier. Okay, if you get my metaphor here. So if we have a process, our rock is our process, which we organize and we eliminate. We let that question come at us, but the way we approach it kind of breaks it down and lets it flow past. All the things that aren't necessary flow past, and we're left with the things that we need. All right? So it cleans it up for us. When it cleans it up, just like that trout, either dead or alive, we refine ourselves to flow in a nice way and navigate through that new, current that we've established. And when we do that, it's the process that we practice and refine and work through that gets us to the point where we can solve questions well. And we don't overwhelm our energy sources and our brain energy trying to solve every question. Because if we can get behind that rock in the question and we can navigate the way we normally navigate over and over, same way every time, then we can solve the questions and we can move on. Okay? So what we want to do every time is create a system that will allow you to do that. And the way in which I got there was I had to face first in the stream. Face first in the stream and see what worked. See what would get us through and see what results we got out from the students and myself. Now, I didn't have this when I studied. I was just doing my best to solve problems, right? But the more and more I've been able to see students face that stream of questions in front of me in the coaching calls that we do every day now, but see them there, we've been able to refine the process. So that's why we read the last question, because it creates a barrier around us and helps us understand what we're going for. That's why we read the question nice and easy, looking for points of security and points of reference as we go through there, because everything else falls away. And by having that and then identifying what the real question issue is, what the problem is, that creates that rock that blocks everything to go, okay, I feel secure now. I know what I'm looking for. I'm not overwhelmed with all these other superfluous, unnecessary words. So if we have that general structure, and if we practice the process of doing it and methodically working through the answers one by one, then we can get more right. Okay? And so what you need to see yourself is as having the process be your best asset. Okay? It's not the only thing you need, but it's a big darn part of it. So the process and following it and understanding and creating that wave or that blocker of the current is super important. Now, what we also need is we need the knowledge. You've got to be able to swim some through the material. Okay? And so if we can create simplicity and we can create, a memory inside of us and an understanding, then you're going to be able to navigate what's left in the channel that's left and really get to the right answer. So evolutionary, how we got there was refinement. See what worked. Tried a bunch of different things. Didn't work. This worked. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. That's how we got here. And as we start to think about it now, we're starting to refine it. But that's the big thing that you need to leave this conversation with. All right? So it's kind of a weird one. I'll give you that as we think of the evolutionary approach. But what you need to do today is you need to slow down. Okay? You need to think about how you're approaching questions. Are you using the defined approach that I talked about? If not, you're facing that river too much. It's too much in your face. You're making it harder than it should be. So if we can slow down, follow the process, which simplify things for you and creates a barrier for us in a good way, creates a shield, something we can rely on, that creates a blocker so that we can use our knowledge to solve it, then we're on the path. Then when we get in there, we really say, do I understand what the problem is? Do I understand where I am? Do I understand what the appropriate solution would be? We don't want to search and hunt and peck. Maybe this is an input, maybe it's an output. That's not the way we do it. We want to logically say, what is the best path forward? How are we swimming through this little stream? It's like a flow, right? So I think the metaphor works. All right, so this is just a little lesson today on that. So get the process down, take some time, slow it down, and start thinking about what you actually know. And once you go there, then you'll have things for your evaporating data dump. You'll have things to dive into. You'll be able to go back to the days if you're in the accelerator and find them in there. The flows. You'll talk to your coaches if you're in the accelerator program. You'll be able to do all that. So quick lesson for today. Use the same thing that the fish used, whether knowingly or unknowingly, to be able to navigate these streams. We can do the same thing to refine our processes and get more questions right. So cool. I appreciate it. Tomorrow we have another accelerator success story. This is a really, really awesome one. And so we're going to talk about how Liz went through and got PMP in under a month, had failed before, came back in, did really well. This is the thing that made all the difference. And we're going to talk about exactly what she thought, how she thought differently, how she approached it differently, and how you can use it to do better. So, all right. Thanks for sticking on here. We're approaching 100,000 unique downloads, which is a fun day. So download it, and we're going to have a little surprise when we get to 100,000. So talk to you later. Appreciate it. See ya.